It's cold. I'm cold. Hello and happy Monday, everyone, or happy whatever day it is you happen to be watching. I hope you had a fantastic weekend, had a great Monday, and are looking forward to an awesome week. I'm super excited because I'm getting out in the garden. We're gonna do some measuring today. Obviously, it's mid-January, so it's a little too early to do planting of any sort. I could do cold weather plants. That'd be like lettuces, broccoli, and cauliflower, stuff like that, Brussels sprouts, but I don't have tunnels that I could plant anything in. Basically what that is you would plant your stuff in the ground or in your raised bed, whatever you're using, and then it would have a ring that goes over the top and plastic sheet that would protect it from the cold. I don't have that stuff, so I can't really plant the cold weather things now, and where I would be able to plant it, there's a whole bunch of snow, and it's in the path of like all the wind up here, so it would just rip away all of my plastic, and it wouldn't do me any good anyway. The plants would just freeze. So we're going to do some measuring to start planning for what I'm going to do this spring in the garden. And because it is still mid-January, there is a bunch of snow in the garden shed still, or not the shed, but in the garden space still. So along the edges, on the outside of the fence, there is less snow. So we're going to do a lot of the measuring outside of the garden because that'll tell me what the inside space will be roughly. So basically, we're gonna start that now. I'm gonna measure and then we're gonna see how long I last because it is kind of windy today. It is mid-January, so it's cold. Let's see how many times I can say mid-January in this video. So yeah, let's start measuring and then we'll head inside and I'll sketch things up and go through all of my seeds and see what needs to get purchased and get excited. Here we go. I probably could have waited a bit longer for the glacier in my garden to melt off a bit more, but I've been so excited to get started on planting in my garden, I figured it was probably good enough as it was now to start getting in there and do all the measuring I needed to do. I already know that my garden space isn't a perfect rectangle, so it makes it tough to get super accurate measurements, so I did the best that I could with what I've got. Specifically, there's a section on the south side, or the area that's closest to the barn, that slopes, and this is also where the fence is not a perfect rectangle. It angles along with the slope, and I think what they were doing there is it's also so you can back up a trailer to that big barn door. So along that area, it's just going to be hard for me to put raised beds. So my plan for the limited space that I have and the slope that's there, I'm going to be using a bit of a hybrid garden plan. What that means for me is where it's flat, I'll have both in-ground and raised beds for planting, and along the fence where it's sloped, I'll plant long-term berries like raspberries and blackberries. And I actually completely forgot to measure a section, but it's that strange part along the barn at that angle, so I'm not too terribly worried about getting an accurate measurement right there. Okay, it's cold. I'm cold. Got my measurements done, so I think we can go inside, do some actual sketching, and start planning. So here we go. This is the most comprehensive plan I've drawn up for the garden since we moved onto the property. It's been something I've meant to do for a while, and it's been a bit of a hang-up for me since I'm working with more permanent plants than I'm used to, like trees and berries, and I want to make sure to plant them in spots I'm not going to want to use for regular garden rotations. Another hurdle I'm working with is the actual beds themselves. I want both raised and in-ground beds, so I have to plan my space very carefully to make sure I can rotate my crops every year. I also want the space between the beds to be wide enough to easily walk through with a wheelbarrow. I'm pretty happy right now with what I've sketched up, but it's likely everything will have to shift a bit when I take measurements again after all the snow is melted off, and I can use stakes and string to mark out where the beds will go. One of the advantages of waiting this long to draw up the plans for the garden is now I know what each season looks like across the property. I've been able to see which sections of the garden will get the most sun, where the shade is, how aggressive the deer are and what plants they like to eat, and how the wind might affect how the plants will grow. It's also given me more time to decide what I want to grow and where a good spot for a greenhouse would be. I'm still getting used to having a space that's dedicated to just a garden. I've only ever grown in containers and small raised beds because we only ever had a yard before, and the yard space had to be shared with the dogs. So it's been a bit overwhelming, and I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. I already struggled with last year's garden since it was so hot and so dry. It was just a rough growing season, and I'm determined to do better this year. Thankfully, we've already gotten more snow and rain than last winter, so fingers crossed it won't be such a disappointing gardening year. In addition to this garden space, I'm also going to be growing a small kitchen garden in pots on the deck. I'm going to make a whole video on this, but the short version of the plan for that garden is to grow produce that we use a lot of closer to the house so it's easier to harvest and use. There will also be a separate video for the plants and everything that I do in the orchard. Right here, I'm struggling a little bit with how far apart I want the beds to be. So these are the raised beds. They are 2 foot by 6 foot long, and I can guarantee right now that when I get into the garden and can mark everything with stakes, that this drawing won't match what ends up happening. And that's okay. But right now, I just need to get something on paper to help me visualize better how to plan everything. In-ground garden beds, these are sections where you plant straight into the dirt, not in a pot or a raised bed. But in-ground garden beds are something I've only worked with at this property. I've produced corn pretty well, and I had some beautiful potato plants, but that's pretty much the extent of the experience I've had with in-ground gardening, and I'm really hoping to get some more of that under my belt this year as well. I've also never worked with a greenhouse, so I'm really excited to get one built and be able to grow year-round produce. Now with the garden sketched up, it is time to go through all my seeds and see what I need to stock up on again. My biggest suggestion to anyone trying to get into gardening is to grow food you like. This is exactly what we do because it means that we're not wasting space, time, water, or energy growing something we're not even going to eat. Right now is also the perfect time to go out and buy your seeds because it's still too early to plant for a lot of growing zones. That means there should be plenty of stock of whatever it is you want. And if you're thinking about fruit and nut trees, now is also a good time to order those so you don't get stuck on a waiting list. Late winter is one of my favorite times of the year to plan for and prepare my supplies to get back in the garden, since it's generally a lot calmer of a season compared to the other three, with more downtime to think and really get into the little details. I'm also hoping to work more with companion planting this year. I have another video in the works that goes into all the details of what this is, but in a nutshell, companion planting is all about making the most of your garden space by planting crops that benefit each other close together. This would include like different types of produce that help each other, or flowers that repel insects around particular plants. So that's really what I want to try again this year as well, and also just to get some more color in the garden and some flowers to help introduce bees and other pollinators. Well, I've got my list of things I need to buy. I've got my measurements. Now it's just a matter of waiting for snow to melt off all the way, getting the raised beds in there and purchased, and just finishing up the measuring, making sure I have it right, because part of it just doesn't quite look right, so we'll double check when there's less snow on the ground. Just do a little bit. There's no guaranteeing that it's actually rectangular in shape. In fact, I know it's not rectangular in shape, so we'll see. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you like what you saw, please let me know. You can drop a like, a comment. You can subscribe if you'd like. If you want to see more, you can go check out my TikTok and my Instagram. You can also read my blog. And with that, thanks again, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.